If you'd like to be boldly confronted by the idea that democracy is futile and doesn't work, have a quick look at the presidential debates, where it becomes unignorable that the options that this 300 million plus population nation has filtered its decision down to is im or im. That's what you're choosing from. Let's have a look and see if which one of those people is closest to the utopia that you deserve.
Will you shut up, man?
Listen, don't ever use that word.
Oh, give me a break.
Because you know what? There's nothing smart about you.
It's weird, isn't it? Because we live in an age where there's so much data analysis, statistical analysis, surveillance and observation of people's behaviour. And yet the kind of schoolyard bantering technique still yet prevails. Of course, we expect it from Donald Trump, but Joe Biden participating in it, I suppose, thinking that what you've got to do is be seen to stand up to Trump, is in a way it lowers the threshold of the entire exercise. And I know that we live in a deeply polemicised time where there'll be some people that really, really like Donald Trump or really, really like Joe Biden. But don't you feel that if you look inside yourself for a moment and consider the things that are truly important to you, the relationships with people you love, your life, what you do for a living, or your lack of ability to earn money, that in truth, neither of these figures are going to be able to significantly help you, that you're being offered either a sort of a palliative reprieve from the horror of Trump, or if you are pro-Trump, someone that, this is my guess, seems to exemplify and demonstrate your feelings of rage, disenfranchisement and loss. But you're more sophisticated than that, aren't you? Aren't we able to look beyond the emblematic function of these two old men, without disrespect, to the reality of a system that offers you these two alternatives? I'm always struck in these presidential debates by the sort of beauty of the constitutional document inspired by Thomas Paine, its sort of elegance and significance in spite of its shortcomings, requirement for amendments, inability to acknowledge the true meaning of words like equality between sexes and races, etc., and how that failed the great American experiment, and that document is distilled into this discourse, this puerile, personal and limited discourse. Neither side, whether you prefer the sort of apparently self-made but sort of inherited wealth billionaire Donald Trump and his sort of overt grotesquism, and I would have to say sort of oratory brilliance on occasion, and his sort of ability to seem like a normal person rather than the groomed political rhetoric of a career politician like Biden. In both cases, you're looking at sort of like pimples on the body politic that will not alter. The interests of the truly powerful will not be significantly impacted whichever one of these two men is elected. Whether we're talking about tech giants or pharmaceutical companies, and I know there'll be people watching this that know a lot more about politics than I do. How could there not be? And you'll say, no, because the Democrats have got this thing where they're going to break down Silicon Valley, or Trump's got this thing where he's going to confront Facebook or Google. But my sense is that there will be no meaningful change within a system, the primary objective of which is its own preservation.
I'm not here to call out his lies. Everybody knows he's a liar.
But you
I just
agree.
want to make sure.
Joe, you're the liar.
I want to make sure.
Graduated last in your class, not first in your class.
Like Trump's baiting is a sort of a little bit juvenile, isn't it? But and Joe Biden does seem nice, doesn't he? Like, I remember the last time there were these presidential elections, we were presented with the bombast of Trump, or the kind of something about Hillary Clinton, and which, there's obviously the polls or the results speak for themselves, although some people obviously will say, the popular vote and all that. But Hillary Clinton weren't the right candidate. I don't feel that Joe Biden's the right candidate. But more importantly than that, this is not the right way to govern a country. This is not the right way. I wonder why, when there's been such an advance in medicine, such advance in technology, that when it comes to our constitutional and political systems, we're happy to accept ideas that are 200 or 300 years old. Well, the reason is because these systems are designed to prevent radical change. Incremental change is possible. Did you see that brilliant documentary, Crip Camp, on Netflix about sort of disabled rights activists? And even with a cause as obvious and as clear as the right for people with various disabilities to use public amenities, to be permitted to use public spaces, it took like 30 or 40 years for the rights to be afforded, and of course they still face prejudice and bigotry. These systems move slowly. Centralised power of this nature can no longer serve a diverse, different, disparate population. It's over. All that this can bring about is our own destruction as a planet. We kind of know that. And it, I think, leads to a sort of fertile, imaginative space for conspiracy and rage and oppositionism, because truly, whether you prefer that gentleman that's sort of basically, I mean, look at them, just look at how similar they are. Look at the number of people you've seen in your own life, and then look at the results of this complex electoral process has created. You can have him or him. There isn't a woman of colour or someone in a wheelchair, or like it's this or this. It's this or this, and in a sense, that's I welcome that, because superficial diversity, as offered by kind of notional support for people from different kind of backgrounds, different identities, masks the fact that systemic change is slow, and systemic change will not be delivered by a system that requires its own sustenance, its own economic sustenance, its own political sustenance. The institutions and agencies that operate behind the veil of this, and I'm not talking sort of deep state type stuff, I'm just talking about financial interests and institutionalization, do not alter as a result of this kind of democratic process. And how do I know this? Because history.
That was a hot mess inside a dumpster fire, inside a train wreck. That was the worst debate I have ever seen. In fact, it wasn't even a debate. It was a disgrace. And it's primarily because of President Trump, who spent the entire time interrupting.
Also, again, with this sort of oppositional and fragmented political space that concerns more than America, it's a global phenomena, certainly in European countries, Anglophonic countries, etc. It's predictable and obvious that CNN will go, Trump, what a dick. Fox will go, Biden, what an old coot. It's clear and predictable. In a sense, the whole thing is becoming more observably a facade, because it's so pronounced in its absurdity. Like Abraham Lincoln, or like these sort of glorious orators. Don't you think as well? Because to bring this up, you should watch it if you haven't yet. You watch that Crip Camp and you see that woman, I thought she was called something like Jeannie Humane, or I can't remember her surname, forgive me. But the dominant disability rights activist, you see that person, you think that person should be a politician, that person should be run the country. Or if you watch that terrifying, it's on BBC iPlayer if you have access to that, Jim Jones documentary about the horrors of Jonestown, the congressman that goes over there, Congressman Leo Ryan, I think he was called, that went over to Jonestown. That dude had gone deep cover to expose what do I want to say, sort of poor prison conditions and even seal hunting. He'd done all sorts of, he's a person that's willing to sacrifice and give. I felt a bit sorry for Joe Biden when he did that, when President Trump came out. It's sort of that was his humanity for a moment, hey, and then, I better turn this into something aggressive. What is the dominant, a lexicon, or even in terms of body language, it's sort of aggression. I suppose it's a debate. I suppose it sort of requires kind of conflict, but wouldn't you rather have a system where there's an acceptance that people are different and we handle one another with grace and love and an acknowledgement, even if you have no particular prescriptive spiritual or religious belief, that there are two people that were born, that will die, not that far in the future, in particular in these cases, and that compassion and love and respect have to be elevated to the level of posturing and sort of grand slamming. And in an environment where the options and opportunities seem so limited, where it's been so disheartening, politics for the last 20, 30 years, maybe even longer than that. Maybe, some people like Yanis Varoufakis, who knows the score, let's face it, 1,000 times better than somebody like me, says that the Democratic Party was never intended to be anything other than a sort of a republicanism with gestures. And if you don't offer an alternative to conservatism, to traditionalism, to fear-based, cynical politics that the right somewhat represents, as well as kind of traditional values such as the rights of the individual and family values, etc., then you're not gonna inspire people to change. Gestures aren't enough. I don't cast personal aspersions on Joe Biden because, as I say, he seems like a nice person. I don't know enough about it, or even Donald Trump. Who cares? My focus is, as always, the inability of these systems to deliver real change, to deliver to you, an ordinary person, a better life, a meaningful life when we are confronted by a sort of ecological meltdown, a pandemic, divisivism, a kind of behavioural experiment through online technologies that is manipulating us to an extent that was unimaginable even 30 years ago. We need to consider radical change. Radical change comes with the risk, of course, can give rise to demagogues and lunatics and maniacs, but clearly decentralisation, meaningful regulation of powerful economic interests, and a return to a kind of graceful politics, acceptance of real difference of opinion, difference of identity, has to be reintroduced. A kind of honour, a kind of respect, a removal of this contempt, which seems now to dominate even the upper echelons, the pinnacle of world power. Seems like people squabbling in a schoolyard. This should give you a visceral realization that these systems are over. Witness some invisible force from your own unconscious is telling you this is what this is now. It's two elderly men talking to each other like they are 12 years old. There needs to be a new awakening, a new change, a radical new system.